everybody, I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Joy Evans.
And I'm Mike Delisio.
And today we're taking a look at, once again, another game from Off the Page Games. This is called Corpse. Is it Corpse or Core?
It's Core.
I said Core and someone told me Corpse. Okay, so it's Core of Discovery.
Yes.
That's what I thought it was. And this is a game set in the world of Manifest Destiny. And this is the first time I've reviewed one of these where I haven't yet to read the comic because we've moved to Fort Myers and I need to go to the library and get a library card so I can get Hoopla so I can read the thing. A lot of steps involved there.
Not worth it.
Have you read it at all, Joey? I've read some of it. I have not gotten through a whole lot of it. I have gotten through the parts in the graphic novel or in the comic that go through what's in the base game, but there's a whole lot after that.
No, I have not read it. I'd like to, though. I love the art style.
Yeah, so this is based on that comic, and which is essentially Lewis and Clark in a slightly alternate world with minotaurs and carnivorous plants and more.
As it should be.
Yeah. And so that's what this game is. It is a cooperative deduction-esque game of survival, I guess. That's the best way to describe it. You're trying to survive and deduct. In fact, Mike's going to show you how to play right now.
All right, here we see a fully set up play area for the fauna chapter of the game. And so I'm not going to go into tremendous detail about all this, but I want to point out some major things. The first thing is that every player is going to choose a character, all right? And so there are several. I just happen to have Lewis out here, which gives him a special ability that they would have to exhaust, which would mean kind of like turn it 90 degrees. And then it says that if they do that, if they happen to gain a resource or water instead of one, which would normally be the case, they would get two. So there's many different characters and more characters come in the other chapters and such. You can just choose whichever one is most appealing to you. And then depending upon the player count, each player is going to start with a certain number of gear cards that they get to choose. And I just have it set up as a solo game, which would mean you'd have 3. But again, depending on player count. And all of these are going to have some type of ability. Some of them, actually all 3 of these happen to be exhaust gear cards, but sometimes they are use and then you're done with them. All right. And so it just depends on the particular gear cards you've chosen. And there's also a way to make any game easier, and that's to add in this training gear of medicine. And it doesn't count towards your gear limit. So this is really just a way to make the game a bit easier. I'm just going to say that I use that on pretty much every game of this I play. Okay? All right. So the other thing is that right here was the peak. It tells you it's on B3. So you know that there's a rock right here. That's really all you know at the beginning. On your turn, you're going to be doing an explore action, okay, which is to remove a path token and then explore the terrain of that path. And then you've got a number of different free actions that you can do. When you explore, what you're doing is you are removing a path token from the board. There are some rules behind that. This is telling you that the first path that you explore has to be in column 7. So I could choose any one of those. If I am going to explore, I would take one and remove it, and it's going to reveal what's underneath it. Now, I'm not going to do that here because, again, I do not want to spoil even one of the maps that come in the game. But generally speaking, it's going to be a terrain type that is going to be represented by a number of different icons here, okay? And so when you remove them, they're going to oftentimes show a resource. So perhaps it'll show this water icon, which would mean that you would get a water there, okay? Or it might show a wood icon, which would mean you get wood there. This particular chapter, Fauna, has a different resource, a vine, that is kind of specific to this chapter, okay? But there are some general logistical rules that you can follow. So this is telling you that water and wood are always going to be orthogonally adjacent to each other. Berries and teepees are going to be diagonally adjacent to each other. Teepees and skulls are going to be in the surrounding areas, one of the, 8 surrounding areas, and that you'll find a vine in the same column as a rock resource and vice versa, okay? This is also telling you that for this particular map, there is one wood resource per row and column. So you're never going to have a row or a column with more than one wood resource in it. All right. It is telling you that this, I believe it's a swamp or a marsh, is going to be orthogonally adjacent to water and to a rock. All of the rocks are connected, none of them on the edge, and they are unpassable. So you know that all of the rocks are going to be connected to each other, and that there's not going to be any on the edge. So you know there's not a rock there because that's on the edge. All right. And it's got some other kind of general rules for forts, fields, and things along those lines, which oftentimes are going to be, specific to whatever chapter you're playing. So you're going to be taking turns. You're going to be removing the path tokens and then activating the path, usually getting a resource of some type. So let's say that this one happened to be a wood. I would go ahead and take that wood piece and I would put it in my backpack here. You've got 4 spots that you can fill without fatigue. If you put in those last 2, you're going to have fatigue, which means you either need to discard down to 4 or get rid of a water. If you happen to build a shelter, let's say that I had found one of these spots where I can build a shelter. Let's say, for example, it was right there. Now there is no fatigue penalty, and I can have up to 6 items in my backpack without penalty. All right. So let's say I remove that, it's wood. What you're going to do is then flip that over, and you're going to see this sun token. You place that up above the current challenge card that you're working on. So in every game, this Approach the Arch is going to be the first challenge card you face. And what it tells you is a couple of things. What number of tokens have to be on it for it to activate? So we know we're going to get essentially 5 turns before this activates in most cases. And what you need to do to successfully complete this card, which is saying you need to spend a wood resource. So if after 5 days, maybe I'd gotten some other resources, but if I still had a wood resource there, I could just spend that back to the supply, and that would mean I pass this, which would give me a food or a berry. If you fail it, you still get the food, but here in this case, you would lose a water, all right? And so that's going to be kind of the flow of the game, is that you're going to go through, you're going to be removing path tokens, using logic to tell you what might be where. So if I had found a wood there, then I know that water is either here, here, or here. Just simple things along those lines. I would also know that if this was wood, there's no more wood in this column or in this row, things along those lines. So once this had been either failed or completed, then we go to the next card, which this one is actually specific to this chapter, and you can see that little icon there that tells you. Most of these card decks during setup are mixtures of the core game cards and chapter-specific cards. This is one that would take 3 days to complete, and it's telling you that you have to remove a skull, a vine, and a water. And if you pass, it's going to give you a particular token that's specific. If you fail, you'll still get that token, but it's going to lose 3 water. Actually, this one's not a great one. It just kind of clogs up your backpack there. All right. And then once you have gone through all 3, passing or failing, then you're going to get to the end of day. And here is one of the potential loss conditions of the game. If you cannot feed your crew, all right, you have to spend a food, then you starve and you lose the game. So that's one of the losing conditions, is not being able to feed your crew at the end of the day. If you successfully get through that, then you proceed into the night, and this is where you're going to be revealing threat cards, okay? If there is already a monster in play that had come out through a previous action, then you don't reveal a new one. But if there isn't, then you would reveal a threat card. It might give you a monster. This is a slight spoiler, but not a whole lot. You're having to fight minotaurs. That's how you win this chapter, kill 3 minotaurs, but that's not much of a spoiler there. And then you would have to kind of assess that threat. You would refresh all characters and gear, put 3 more cards out, and you're going to continue to do this until either of the losing conditions, which is not being able to feed your food, running out of water, and if you cannot ever refill this to 3 cards. Those are the 3 losing conditions. The winning condition is specific to the chapter. In this case, you have to kill 3 Minotaurs. So you have to kind of find out how to kill them throughout the course of the game and then be able to successfully kill 3 of them to be able to be successful. Now, high-level overview, different chapters are going to work differently, but that should give you a basic idea. You're using logistical rules to kind of figure out where different terrain is on the map, things that you're going to need to successfully complete these cards, and ultimately fulfill the mission of the chapter before one of the 3 losing conditions. All right, let's head back up and we'll let you know what we think.
You know, when I first played this game, Mike, one of the games it really reminds me of in many ways is Robinson Crusoe.
Really?
Not in the mechanisms as much, but just in the fact that you're like trying to get stuff and start a fire to survive and you deal with things. They're very different, but I think if you like that survival / exploration of Robinson Crusoe, I think you will like this game just based on that.
Yeah, and they're both cooperative games, too. That's a really interesting connection, Tom, and one that I'm kind of annoyed that I didn't make myself, because I think you're spot on there. As you said, mechanically, they're very, very different. But they're both tough. I'll just say that right off the bat, is that the difficulty of Core of Discovery is close, I would say, to maybe not quite as hard. Right off the bat, it's tough. It's a tough game, but it's this feeling of survival and exploration. So yeah, I think that's a really good comparison.
Well, it's funny that initially I was like, this is like Search for Planet X, Planet X, Lost Species, all that. But then as those challenges and threats and monsters and stuff hit you, I'm like, all right, there's a lot more to it than just a deduction.
It is pretty funny how it ramps up when you first start the game. You have a lot of water, and they'll lose the water, and you're like, not a problem.
Oh, I know.
We'll drink some water. And then at the end, you're like, where'd all the water go? And it ramps up pretty quickly. So at the end of the game, you run into this dilemma, and every game I played of it, where it's like, do we just try to survive, or do we see if we can win the game? So like there's a Minotaur there in the Minotaur one, and you're like, should we kill that Minotaur with these precious resources? But we also need resources to survive. And it comes down to the wire a lot of times. Yeah. And I like that. I agree with Mike that it's hard. And I can't tell you if it's overly difficult or not, because I usually like games not to be super hard. But because it's so exciting for me, I don't know that bothers me as much.
Yeah, and I also think that this is a game that has a learning curve, very much so, especially when it comes to the deduction, because I think that a lot of people, when they play this for the first or second time, are going to feel like this is just too arbitrary. You're having to guess. Well, you really shouldn't be. You really, really shouldn't be. Those logic rules, those deductive rules, ignore them at your peril. I think if you try to rush through and just explore based on whims, then you're not going to be successful and you are going to lose. I think that, every single one of those logistical rules are there for a very specific purpose. Just things like, there's only going to be one wood in each row and column. That can really be very meaningful. And so I guess what I'm getting at is that it took me specifically, I can only speak for myself, but I also, when I've played cooperatively with others, it took a while to really determine how important those logic and deductive rules are, and how the game feels less arbitrary the more you realize the importance of those things.
And that's a good point, because like the way I love seeing them come together for you or any new player you're playing with, right? Where you're like, well, those rules, okay, whatever. But then later you're like, there's this happiness in finding, well, I know this is a wood, and it's like, because everything comes together and shows. I love those moments.
It also really matters when you use the special abilities of your characters and items. When we first play, you're like, I'll take Lewis because why not? And I'll take this piece of equipment because it sounds cool. And then knowing when to use those And you really have to use them to win, frankly. Those special abilities are so important. And I still haven't played without medicine and don't care. Medicine makes you lose some points, but it lets you untap one of your cards. That's important.
Huge.
I use medicine every game as well, Tom.
Well, Mike, let me ask you this. So you played it solo and cooperative. I've not played it solo, and I thought about playing it solo, and then I was like, I really, really enjoyed the talking things through. Yes, I realize that could lead to an alpha gamer telling everyone what to do. I haven't had that experience, but I just liked someone saying, well, this and this, and oh, point this out. I'm like, oh, you're right. The talking for me and solving things was really enjoyable.
Yeah, I think it depends on what experience you're looking for. I think the game works well both ways. I'm with you in that I probably prefer it as a cooperative experience just because you do have that feeling of, hey, we're all in this together. We're going to need every one of our brains to be able to solve this. If you're looking for a really crunchy head-down solo puzzle, it works for that too. But I do think that it's harder for me to play it solo because I really depend upon the other people I'm playing with to spot things that I don't. I have won solo, but I typically have done better when I'm playing with other minds involved because you can see things. Different people have different strengths and verbally talking these things out can help quite a bit. And when I'm playing solo, I don't tend to do that. I have the internal monologue going. And so I think it works well both ways, but it depends on what experience you're looking for.
Which I think is an edge it gives it over these competitive deduction games like the Search series.
Yeah. I also want to give some credit here to how minimalistic the game is.
Yeah.
This box that we have here is the deluxe version. I've not even played the deluxe version. I've only played the regular version. It's a box that's thin. It's half the size it is. And when I open up, I'm like, is that all the pieces there are? There's some tokens and then maps, right? But there is 20 maps, I think, 20 in the base game, which is a lot because, frankly, I'm telling you this. After you play all 20 maps, you could start over again because you're not going to remember what the original maps are. And, Mike, you said you could print more off online?
Yeah, off the page on their website, they're going to be continually offering more maps to print off.
And then there's more chapters. And honestly, the two that come in the base game are really different. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming the other ones are also different?
Yeah, very different. As you mentioned, just in that core box, you've got hours and hours of gameplay, and many, many hours, more than I think a lot of people will spend with a typical game. But yes, there are 4 expansions that were kind of launched at the same time as these 2 initial chapters. And so you've got things like a hidden trader element that you can either play cooperatively or competitively. You've got something called fog, which basically you don't know what the logic rules are, and you're guessing them throughout the game, and you're putting the tokens that you think match. You know the rules, but you don't know which token matches with them. So you're trying to guess that by the end of the game. So some really interesting kind of changes to the core gameplay, but there's a lot of core gameplay in that box.
So what would you give it?
All right, I'm coming in at a 9 on this. I really like this game, mainly because I love Search, but then it also adds the survival element to that. And it's just hard enough that you will lose a lot, but you're always right there next to win. I also love the fact that you can tap. It adds all these elements in games and doesn't overcomplicate it. Haven't mentioned the components either. The fact that it's so I didn't know you could print maps off. It's brilliant. The fact that you can continually go and have a fresh play of it. Man, I really, really like this game.
I will say, component-wise, I told Wendy to write cover sheet on the cover board because I almost threw that away when I first opened the game. I'm like, oh, I don't need this, but you do. I'm giving it an 8.5. I really like the theme. I think it's fun, that whole exploration. I love deduction. I will say I don't think it's arbitrary. Mike says I will say sometimes I feel like a game comes down to, well, we're not sure if it's north or south. We're going to pick one of those directions and hope it's right because you've come that close. So that can happen, but it's still that for me makes an exciting game. I think the length is pretty good. It's around 70 minutes or so for me, and it's a cooperative game where you're probably never ever going to sit there and not think about what's going on. Right. You are involved on everyone's turn. Yep. You're like, don't turn that tile over. Yes. I know what's there. Or we know that's a stone. We need stone, but not yet. So don't go there until later when we can do it, or when you can use your power and say, I know it's stone, then we get a benefit. When do we build the shelter? Can we even get a shelter built? It's a really... I think that there's also levels of... I wish the game I wish they had also said something to the effect of, some characters I think are more powerful than others, and if you use them, like there's one character who you can build a shelter pretty easily. That's really helpful in a scenario where you really need a shelter. So there's some sort of give and take on that, but you'll learn that as playing. So I really like it.
And I'm right there with you guys. I'm coming in at a 9 as well. Actually, there are a couple of little component things. Overall, they're really good. Quality cards, things along those lines. There were some kind of little ambiguities, I think, that probably could have been addressed in the rules a little bit better, so that you didn't have as many, questions about edge cases. I think there were a couple of little clarifications that they've since made afterwards. But overall, I think the game is fantastic. You mentioned the characters, and I agree that those are situationally, some are more powerful than others. And I think that, as you said, as you learn what you need in a particular chapter, you'll tailor the items that you go for and the characters that you choose. But overall, the deduction is really strong in this. I do love the theme, and if you do read the comic, you're really going to enjoy the tie-ins with this, because these chapters really do fit in well with the story. And if you're like me and have been turned on to now 3 different fantastic comics through this publisher, it's just another bonus, because now... not only do I enjoy the game, but I very much enjoy this comic. I very much enjoyed Harrow County and Mind Management, the 2 previous games, and I like those comics as well. So it's a nice bonus to be turned on to these cool comics that I did not know about before.
There you go, folks. That's Core of Discovery. I'm Ta Vassal.
Joe Evans.
I'm Corpse Delicio.
See you next time. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you like this review or whatever you just watched, wasn't it amazing? Check out our channel, Dice Tower. We have all kinds of things. We review games, we do top 10s, we play games live. It's all about board games, but especially the people who play them. Check out Dice Tower YouTube channel.